Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Welcome to the weekend edition of the Bullet. Joining me today is, well, first of all, my boss, Alan Gottlieb. He is the Vice President of the Second Amendment Foundation, the man in charge, if you prefer. Also joining me is Craig Deluz. Craig is with The Rundown, and Beth Alcazar from USCCA. You've seen them both on the air with me before. Alan, I'm going to start with you, if it's all right. I want to jump off, and just released yesterday. We knew it was going to happen. There had been press releases saying it was going to happen, but yesterday the lawsuit was filed. SAF actually filed a lawsuit against Washington State against their, in my opinion, ridiculous 10-round magazine limit and banning anything over that. To start with, could you tell us a little bit about that lawsuit and what brought it about, and a kind of a timeline of when you expect that to be, how you expect that to go forward?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. The Second Amendment Foundation filed this lawsuit as part of our Winning Firearms Freedom One Lawsuit at a Time program. Washington State banned, as you said, magazines that hold over 10 rounds. They banned the sale, and I don't know what happens if you already own one. You're allowed to keep it, but you can't ever get rid of it to anybody. So I don't even know how you dispose of it or let the state know that you've disposed of it. It's a crazy law. And we filed suit with other partners, involved in it with us as well. We telegraphed that we were going to do it. The state went and passed it anyway. The governor signed it, and the attorney general, of course, lobbied for it to get through to begin with. Now he has to defend it in court. And I'm kind of excited about this case because eventually one of these magazine ban cases is going to get to the United States Supreme Court. With regard to the timeline, it's hard to say. The Western District of Washington, we're in federal court, and the courts are a bit backlogged right now. We filed it now because the law goes into effect July 1st, and we're hoping to get at least a timeline from the courts on what's going to transpire with it prior to the July 1 date. But what's going to exactly happen, how long it's going to take, I don't know. I'm going to assume the anti-gun rights attorney general, Bob Ferguson in Washington State, who couldn't care less about people's, self-protection rights or means of self-protection, is going to do anything he can to stall it out as long as possible and cost us as much money as possible. Since he gets to use taxpayer funds and has hundreds of lawyers on staff, he'll do everything he can to try and drag this out.
Is there any chance of getting an injunction so that it doesn't go into effect on July 1st?
I'm leaving that up to our attorneys. We've got a great local counsel in Joel Ard, who's fought firearms battles here in the state of Washington before, and Cooper and Kirk, the noted law firm in Washington, D.C., is engaged with it as well. So we have good representation. I'm leaving it up to them to determine the best way forward with it. I think until the judge gives us some kind of timeline on what's going on and they get to have a pre-conference meeting with them, then we'll know better what kind of pre-motion filings we'll be making, pre-trial filings.
Okay. Craig or Beth, any questions you want to bring about the Washington lawsuit? Craig, I lost your audio.
I'm sorry about that. The courts, at least the Ninth Circuit, supposedly is already, I just find it very frustrating that, we already know this is something that's already going to be decided, and yet and still they still in Washington State still went ahead and pushed it through. By the way, we already have that sort of that same ban right here in the state of California, and as I'm sure you've known by the news, it has not decreased violence involving firearms one bit.
Right. Now, from memory, Craig, if I'm remembering right, appeals court Ninth Circuit declared the law unconstitutional, but in Bonk, the Ninth Circuit overturned it because they have a significant number more anti-gun judges and pro-gun rights judges, and that case has been petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court. So that the Supreme Court has a chance to hear that one first. They may choose to hear California's, they may choose to hear a few others that are also filed around the country, or they may wait for Washington's. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's I will tell you the interesting thing was both the district court judge as well as, like you said, the three-judge panel, both. And what was interesting was they actually talked about and discussed the technology. They talked about the law. And then, unfortunately, as they usually wind up doing at the en banc level, they just threw all that out. Facts, law, doesn't matter. This is what we want to do.
Yeah, that's why the U.S. Supreme Court is eventually going to have to address this issue, and I'm sure they will. They also have a case petition from the Second Amendment Foundation over Maryland's assault weapon ban, which also may, in fact, impact magazines' capacity size as well. And likewise, as you all know, which we're going to probably talk about in a minute or two, is the U.S. Supreme Court. We're waiting for a decision any day now on the New York State carry case, and that case again too may have some language in it that upends some of this anti-gun judges thumbing their noses at previous Supreme Court decisions.
Yeah, if we could, I do want to branch off into that New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case. When I looked earlier this week, there were 4 dates left this month for releasing decisions from the Supreme Court. That's this coming Monday, the following Monday, then the following Tuesday after that, and finally the last Monday of the month. And then they stand for recess. So my understanding is that decision will come this month, and I've been saying on the air, I'm hopeful that Judge Thomas is the one that writes the opinion. We're all waiting with bated breath to see what comes of this. I'm confident that it is going to come down in our favor. It's just how much.
Yeah, there is a slight possibility it won't happen until the first week of July. Every now and then, sometimes they slip a week, but we are expecting it in June, as you mentioned. The question is how big are we going to win? I am sure we're going to win, based on the fact of a couple things. One, the lower court judge ruled against us, the appeals court ruled against us, and the Supreme Court, I don't think, would have taken the case if they were happy with the lower court rulings. Likewise, at oral arguments, our side did very, very well, and the questions from a majority of the judges were not very good for New York State. This is a case where in New York where you have to show good cause to be able to get a permit, and of course in New York it's next to impossible to show good cause. So there's no doubt I think we're going to win it. What I'm hoping for in this ruling is we get a couple of things that they talk about. One is that your Second Amendment rights don't stop at your front door. That in fact, your right to own a firearm and use a firearm for self-protection, is also outside your home. The other thing I'd like them to do is talk about level of scrutiny. In the 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases that we've won, they didn't bother really talking about levels of scrutiny because the lower courts have to apply, because it was so obvious that we should just win that, quote unquote, they felt like under any level of scrutiny, we have Second Amendment rights. But the lower courts have now thumbed their noses at that, and instead of using strict scrutiny, some of them tried to use rational basis, which means all the proof of your rights are on you, not on the government, and that some of them have used intermediate scrutiny, where they really define it as rational basis, even though they call it intermediate scrutiny. So I'm hoping to get a level of scrutiny that gets applied to these kinds of cases, which will impact and affect lots of other cases, including these magazine bans. And so I'm kind of excited about that.
One thing that, and this is way off on the side, but I got asked on social media through a private message a while back that could it go so well in the Supreme Court that, well, I might be out of a job, that the SAF might not need to exist. Well, the chances of that are virtually none, because New York's still going to be New York. New Jersey is still going to be New Jersey. They're going to go the absolute minimum they have to, that they think they're going to comply with the Supreme Court decision, but they're still going to infringe. They'll still have to be sued.
Yeah. You almost forgot California's still going to be California.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's Paul. That's all totally true. But on top of that, you have the fact that the anti-gun lobby, the gun prohibition lobby in this country, is grown a lot. They're extremely well funded, to the tune of millions of dollars. But now we're looking at a lot of the Bitcoin cryptocurrency people coming in, and it might be funded to the tune of billions of dollars. They're not going to let go. They're going to keep doing this no matter what. and we can expect that the gun prohibition establishment, and particularly a lot of the people in the legacy media, are going to continue attacking gun rights no matter what. I wish you could be out of business. I'm getting to the point where I would like to retire and enjoy my life a little bit more than fighting for gun rights 24/7. But on the other hand, they're not going to go away, and we know that.
Yeah, absolutely. The fight will have to continue. It took what 90 years to get from the 1930s to where we are now. It's not going to go back in one Supreme Court decision.
No, not at all. But my hope is, let me backtrack a bit. In the Heller decision, the Supreme Court ruled that, in fact, the Second Amendment is, in fact, an individual right, and that, it applies to commonly owned firearms in our country, and the right of self-defense was paramount. In the McDonald decision, they took what they did in Heller and built on it and incorporated it through the 14th Amendment, making it applicable to all the states. Because the Washington, D.C. case, the Heller case was Washington, D.C., which is a political enclave, so to speak, of the federal government. It's not a state. McDonald then expanded it so that states and cities and other political jurisdictions had to respect your federal Second Amendment rights as well. And by incorporating the Second Amendment, it then allowed for all these other suits to be filed. So in some ways, the McDonald suit was the most important one, and I'm really glad that the Second Amendment Foundation brought that. That allows everybody now to file these suits all across the country, no matter what gun rights group it is, which I'm really kind of proud of. But the problem is neither of these cases had a level of scrutiny applied to them. They talk about the core right, and obviously having a firearm in your own home, which is what Heller and McDonald sort of dealt with, because the plaintiffs in this case were fighting against the ban of having a gun in their own home. They basically just talked about the core right. So our opponents are arguing, well, the right only applies in your own home now. It doesn't apply anywhere else because it's outside the core right. And if it's outside the core right, we can strip your rights away from you for any reason we want to. And that's why this case now is really important. I hope it closes that loophole where these lower court anti-gun judges, particularly like in the Ninth Circuit, are just saying you don't have any Second Amendment rights at all, basically. And hopefully this is going to take care of that. If it does that, there's right now roughly about 30 to 40 cases in the federal courts that this could impact because of level of scrutiny or saying that your right doesn't stop at your front door. That's really, really important for us. And they may go further than that and do it in a way that just stops a lot of this shenanigans to begin with without having to go back to court. So maybe if we get a little lucky, some of the Second Amendment Foundation's work will become a little easier and we won't have to raise as much money for these legal battles.
Yeah, understanding the level of scrutiny is vitally important because in some cases, the opponent or the defendants don't even have to come up with whatever the reason is. In other words, if you can find a reason why this law makes sense, then that's rational basis. And in some cases, especially in the Ninth Circuit, I've seen it happen several times, where the judge is the one who came up with the reason. It wasn't even something that was proposed or discussed by the defendants. When that is what you're dealing with, it's literally like you are working against both your opponents and you're going against the court. And by making them actually say, look, you have to come up with a really good reason. At one, you have to identify that there's no other way in which you can meet this goal. And number two, you have to do it. You have to show that this doesn't infringe on people's rights, or at least it minimally infringes. And in many cases, after case, they're just not doing that.
Yeah, I want to give you a crazy example of what you're saying. In the Ninth Circuit, we've now won in California. We've basically won against their law that bans 18 to 20 young adults, 18 to 20 years old, from being able to buy or own, so-called semi-automatic rifles. We have a similar case in Washington State, which hasn't percolated all the way up through the Ninth Circuit yet, where the lower court federal judge ruled that, quote-unquote, 18 to 20-year-olds can't own guns because they're not responsible. And the proof of it is because when he was 18 and 20 and worked on and lived on a farm, he saw many young 18, 20-year-olds be so stupid that they stuck their fingers in combines and lost their fingers. And that's the reason to ban gun ownership.
Yeah, that
there
makes
you go.
perfect
Figure
sense.
that out.
Great example. Great example. I see the crossover there very, very clearly. What one random person does on a farm in his youth definitely applies to me as a mom wanting to protect my kids. Absolutely. And speaking of
Look,
that,
let me just tell you right now.
Stop. No, not going to go there. What constantly puzzles me with this is we're talking about good cause. Well, first and foremost, life itself is good cause. I think that should be enough for anybody to have the 100% support of their right to keep and bear arms no matter where you are. And thinking as a woman too, I am perfectly happy with the fact that I can have firearms in my own home to protect myself while I am here and when my family is here. But where I feel most vulnerable is everywhere else. I don't have a home court advantage, pun intended, when I am traveling to a different state and I'm in a city I've never been to. I'm staying at a hotel somewhere I'm not comfortable with, or I don't know my surroundings. I think that's more than enough to be good cause, because in my own home, I know where things are. I know where I'm most safe. I know where the exit points are. I know escape routes. And my whole family has had the opportunity to practice this and talk about this and work through this. But out and about everywhere else is where I or my family might be more likely to be approached in a violent manner or attacked, or it flabbergasts me. I don't understand that. There's just no logic to that, to me, at all.
Well, actually, Beth, there's no logic to the majority of American people on that, because that's where the public, when you look at polling data, that's where people really support our position. Speaking of polling data, what's kind of interesting is that with all the media and anti-gun politicians, and particularly the Democrats and Joe Biden piling on us over the last month or so, polling data has not really shifted. People still support the Second Amendment and the right to keep their arms, particularly for the right of self-defense. So the other side's got some problems here. For a day or two, everybody, obviously cringes over these crazy, mass incidents that happen with crazed lunatic murderers picking on people in gun-free school zones. But overall, the people, in a day or two, stop to look back at this, at the facts of what happened, and tend to support Second Amendment rights, and we don't lose any ground in the polls. It's really, very kind of interesting that the other side, despite all the millions of dollars that they put into this, and free publicity that they get, they're not able to do much to us. One of the things that really bothers me is that in the case of the shooting in Texas, as an example, the murderer, as a juvenile, committed domestic violence, was convicted of domestic violence, but his records were sealed. So none of those records ever went into the system for the background checks, and he was able to buy his firearms. So you're blaming me and you and all of us, law-abiding gun owners, for a case here again where the government could have maybe solved this before it ever happened, stopped it from happening, prevented it, but didn't do it. And again, if you look at a track record in all these cases, there's always something there where the government has missed signals, miscues, or evidence or something ahead of time to be able to prevent this, and then they want to take it out on our rights and us. And when people look at that and say, hey, that's all the more reason why I need to own a gun to protect myself and my family and my kids.
Well, exactly. In so many of these cases, it's a failure of government in many cases. Not a failure of the right to keep and bear arms. And in many of these cases as well, if individuals had been able to defend themselves, had been able to exercise their right to bear arms, the damage caused by these assailants could have been minimized.
Yeah, so the government promises you security, doesn't deliver it, but takes away your freedom, and in the case you lose everything.
I want to bring up one thing here real quick. First of all, I want to bring this. We're getting comments in here. Diane over on the Facebook side says, thank you for all you do, Alan. And I want to remind everybody, if you want to get your comment in, we'll put it on the air and we'll discuss it. You can comment on either the Facebook or YouTube live video, or if you have Twitter, you can tweet with the hashtag #BulletPodcast. That's actually the fastest way to get it into us. It bypasses all the filters, and we'll get your comment up and we'll discuss it on the air. Next thing I want to get into real quick is, and then we'll let you go after this, Alan, after the Texas school shooting just over a week ago, there has been, it seems like it was an absolute rush to get the dream of all the gun grabbers through Congress. It's made it into the House, and it's working its way through the House right now. They're calling it the Protecting Our Kids Act. It is a ban on anybody under the age of 21 buying firearms. It is putting the bump stock ban going from an ATF fiat. They're actually putting that in law. It is a ban on what they're calling ghost guns, what the rest of us called homemade firearms. And it is a limit down to 10 rounds, copying what California and Washington did. It is a federal limit to 10 rounds on magazines. I talked about this on the air a little bit yesterday, Alan, and I'm going to put this up on the screen again today. Everybody, please call the U.S. Capitol switchboard on Monday, 202-224-3121. We don't have a prayer, in my opinion, of stopping this in the House. We can stop it in the Senate. We do not want the Protecting Our Kids Act to become law. Alan, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Well, first of all, thanks for putting the phone number of the Capitol switchboard up on the screen. I think that's really important. Everybody needs to not just call that number, but also, email and as well, and get to them as quickly as possible, as many ways as you can. That's really important right now. But there is a chance that some of this is going to fall apart in the House, because some of the Democrats who are up for re-election in the midterms, who are facing tough races in battleground districts, are not happy about having this all packaged together as one bill, because there are parts of it they'd like to vote for, but parts of it they don't want to vote for, depending on the district they live in. And as a result, some of the Democrats have been pushing back against Nancy Pelosi, trying to have this go through as one bill. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's going to get slowed down a little bit, I think, with that. And then, of course, it has to go to the Senate. And in the Senate, if it goes through as one bill, go over to the Senate side, it's never going to come through get passed by the Senate in one piece anyway. So we have a good chance here, if the grassroots, gun owners, gun rights activists, and people in America who care about constitutional rights, call that number that you put up on the switchboard. I'd like it if you could put it back up again. I really would appreciate it, so people definitely see it.
Yep.
I think we have a really good chance of defeating it. And if not, parts of this for sure we'll be able to challenge. Second Amendment Foundation will definitely file cases in federal court against it. But the bottom line is, I think we have a chance to win it. What's interesting is some of the polling data that the Second Amendment Foundation has done shows, in fact, that as of today, people are more inclined to vote for politicians who protect Second Amendment rights than they are to support politicians who oppose Second Amendment rights. And that's really, really important. We've not lost ground there. And if anything, I think this is going to galvanize gun owners to show up at the polling places on the election day and midterm elections. And I have a feeling we're going to see some big changes. We just have to hold our ground and stand really firm and fight to win between now and Election Day.
Yeah, and Election Day, is only July, August, September, October. We've only 5 months.
A little over 5 months.
Yeah. So we're right now at the end of primary season. We cannot, if somebody were to slip now, we cannot primary them in most states. South Dakota's primary, for instance, is coming up this coming Tuesday. But we can still get them in the general. It's a little tougher, but we can still do it. We still need to absolutely be holding politicians' feet to the fire, and it doesn't really matter what party they're in. I get on the phone to their staff. You'll never speak to your senator by calling that number. And again, that number 202-224-3121. You'll never speak to your senator, but get to their staff and say, "I will fight against you in November if you vote for this." That will get attention.
Yeah, and remember, you don't just ask for your senators, you also want your House members too.
Yeah.
And even if you think it's not going to work because you have, an anti-gun activist who hates your gun rights representing you, let your voice be heard anyway. And it also doesn't hurt to let other congressmen, other senators know as well. It doesn't have to just be your own. Flood that switchboard.
And I think along with that too, the sentiments need to be that, we are 100% for protecting children wherever they are, in their schools, in our homes, out and about. And the fact that they've labeled it just, oh, it irks me so terribly that, we have to make this stand against something called Protect Our Children Act. I mean, it's just sickening that that's the language that they've chosen to use. But make sure that you're saying we don't want this to happen, but we will stand for other measures that will protect children in schools, whether that's, fortifying or making sure that they have the resources that they need, or making sure that there's more assistance for those who are going through issues that may be mental health related. But we are definitely going to take a stand against these kinds of quote unquote common sense compromises, because we know without a shadow of a doubt, these do not work. They do not keep evil from carrying out evil deeds.
Yeah, it's really kind of, I just want to jump in for a second, because I like to point this out. Our opponents of gun rights usually are also opponents of so-called stop and frisk laws, because they're used more against minorities, and it's a Fourth Amendment violation of just stopping somebody on the street to stop and frisk them. And so our opponents tend to oppose those laws, heavily, but at the same time they don't apply the same standards to gun owners. They'll take away your Second Amendment rights without any problem whatsoever. And the hypocrisy is really kind of rank.
Well, and many of these laws are not. They're not laws where they're actively going to be going out and enforcing them. What's going to happen is they're going to be enforced as you encounter law enforcement. And study after study has shown that young men of color are more likely to have in their encounters with law enforcement. So this is going to have the very same effect that they're complaining about with stop and frisk, except it's going to be people of color who are going to be losing their fundamental right to keep and bear arms. And here's why that's so vitally important. When they talk about shootings and the effect of firearms in the black and brown community, it's not just the victims, it's also the perpetrators. I was on a show just the other day, and it was a person, she was an advocate in Los Angeles for a children's group, children who had died due to gang violence and gun violence. And she was, and it was funny because she was like, look, we need to stop giving these guys slaps on the wrist, and when they commit a crime, they need to go to jail and they need to serve their sentence. And I think the show host didn't know what to expect, because he was expecting her to be anti-gun, and she was anything but, because she recognizes that the problem is not the gun. The problem is the criminal justice system that has decided that we're going to decriminalize crime, and we're going to let criminals, especially violent criminals, back out on the street.
Yeah, the one that really bothers me the most is, like, I'm going to use Chicago as the example. There are people, gang members, that, get arrested for gun crimes. They go to court and they get released immediately with no bail. And you already know they were illegally in possession of firearms because of past criminal records. They put them back out on the street. They commit another crime all over again. People's lives are lost. Innocent lives are lost for no reason besides stupidity by the court and justice system, like in the city of Chicago, and the crime rates keep going up. I mean, it's to the point of sheer lunacy. And add that to demonizing the police, defunding the police, putting restrictions on on activities, so that like here in my own state of Washington, if a law enforcement officer in a patrol car sees somebody commit an illegal act and tries to flee, they're not even allowed to go after them anymore. They can't get in their car and put their red lights on and try to track them down or see where they're going. They're not even allowed to follow. I mean, what are you asking for? I mean, no wonder American people are going out and buying more firearms in record numbers for self-protection, because the government isn't protecting them anymore.
Well, do you recall? I think it was like 6 months or so ago, where there was literally a shootout in the streets of Chicago, and the DA decided we're not going to charge either one of them because they were mutual combatants. Was the argument that they had, and I'm like. And once again, they're shooting in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I mean, our criminal justice system has really fallen apart. Also, our respect for life has fallen apart. We're not living in such a civil society anymore. Things are breaking down. Whenever we have other problems like rampant inflation, all kinds of other problems that the government has gone and created for us, is a breakdown in society to begin with. When the economy skews as badly as it is, all these things contribute to the rise of crime and violence. And I mean, this is why people, again, support our position, because they strongly believe in the right of self-defense.
One more comment coming in, and that's Tony Simon over Simon Says Train says 100% the gun control laws will be enforced in minority and disenfranchises neighborhoods. The history of gun control always impacts minority neighborhoods and minorities more than it does old white dudes. Speaking as an old white dude, minorities are always impacted more by gun control laws than the general public, and that's honestly historically by design. That's how they came about.
It's always about making sure that those people don't have guns. It was the black codes in California in 1870s. They made it so that Native Americans couldn't purchase firearms or ammunition. Then in the 1920s, they went after Chinese and Mexicans. And then in the 1960s, it was, they wanted to disarm the Black Panther Party. It's always been about that. Now, the thing now, though, is that everybody who is not part of the left-wing elite is now those people.
In its history, even in New York, you had the Sullivan Law was, passed to keep guns out of the hands of Irish immigrants. I mean, it's always goes after minorities and the weaker people in our society, and that's the people who probably need the protections of own firearms for self-defense more than anybody. And it's a very regressive history. Liberals don't like to admit that.
One thing, and this has nothing to do about anything we've talked about before, but I know the SAF has fought for it and will continue to fight for it. One thing that burns me is that the immigrants usually have to fight harder than natural-born U.S. citizens for our rights all across the board, but specifically for Second Amendment rights. And I know SAF has filed suits in the past for green card immigrants who are here legally but do not get Second Amendment rights. And I know that will continue going forward. My personal opinion is, if you are on the face of the earth, if you're living and breathing, you have a right to defend yourself. And it's unfortunate that certain state laws limit that to those who actually have a born here citizenship and don't extend that to immigrants.
Yeah, there aren't that many laws on the books left that do that, because we've been so successful in federal court knocking those laws out that it's been really great. And many other states that didn't want to go through litigation with us have changed those laws. So if you're here legally, have a nexus to the country, a green card holder, you're married to a citizen and here legally, as an example, you don't lose your Second Amendment rights. So there's still a few places that have some bad laws on the books. But most of those are now been in the last decade. We've gotten rid of those, and everybody gets treated fairly.
Yeah, some of those places where you do have to deal with that is like in the implementation. In California, we are a may issue state when it comes to concealed carry permits, and so one of the things that we've had to do is remind some of our law enforcement officers that actually had a policy. A few of them had policies where if you were not you had to be a citizen in order to be able to get a concealed carry permit. In most cases, once we informed them of what the law was, they changed their policies. But some of them actually had to be reminded that was in fact the case.
Yeah, well, hopefully the Supreme Court decision we're waiting on this month on the New York carry case will take out this discretionary stuff about showing need and other things of that nature, so that if you have a clean criminal record, if you meet the criteria, they have to issue it, and may issue, maybe go bye-bye. And that's what I'm really hoping for in that New York decision coming out this month.
The last thing, and I'll let you go, Alan. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Craig.
Oh no, you were going to go ahead and let him go. I'll let you let him go, and then I'll talk.
I wanted to bring up one more thing, and that was, I was privy to a board meeting for SAF. I was asked to present there back in September of last year, and one thing that wasn't really hugely touted publicly, but I heard in that board meeting that is really, it shocked me at the time, and I want I want to put out a little bit publicly. The SAF is involved with nationwide on state and federal level dozens of lawsuits, and we're talking high dozens of lawsuits. If I'm remembering right, and my brain isn't the same as it was years ago, but if I'm remembering right, Alan, isn't it north of 50 active lawsuits right now throughout the country that the SAF is involved in?
I think we're lower than 50, but I think we're in the high 30s, low 40s.
So, and I'm going to turn this into a little bit of an infomercial. If you're not a member of the Second Amendment Foundation, a lifetime membership is very reasonable. It's much lower than $150 for a lifetime membership. You're looking 10 times that to get into other gun rights groups for a lifetime membership. $150 gets you a lifetime membership, and it goes to help these lawsuits move forward. So please, if you go to saf.org if you're not a lifetime member, and change that. Alan, I want to thank you.
You can also, before I jump off, you also don't have to be a member at all, either an annual member, a 5-year member, or a life member. You can just make a donation at saf.org. A lot of people don't want to be a member or join, but they want to help support. So you go there, you just make a contribution at saf.org.
Yeah, and absolutely. SAF, one of the reasons I'm so pleased to work for SAF is I've said this for a long time, I'll continue saying it, they've done more for gun rights than any other organization in the courts over the last, I'm going to say 50 years. I don't think anybody else has done as much as the SAF has over the last 50 years, and SAF hasn't existed that long. So
getting close, though.
Yeah. But
we were founded in 1974, so we're only a couple years away from that.
Well, but still, your work in the courts, did it start right away when did you start suing right away?
Well, if I have a few more minutes, I have just a little bit of backlight history because it's kind of fun. When the foundation was founded, one of our goals, of course, was to get a case to the U.S. Supreme Court. And now, of course, we've gotten, 2 of them were ruled in our favor, and another one sitting there right now before the U.S. Supreme Court. So we're kind of excited. But when we first started, it was really a different scenario. You didn't have any law review articles that really supported Second Amendment rights. Everything made it a collective right, not an individual right. There were no court. There was no court jurisdictions. It was pretty just much understood that it was the forgotten amendment and didn't really count in our legal system. And in fact, when we first started, there was only one court decision that supported the right to keep and bear arms, and it wasn't a federal case. It was a case in the state of Oregon, and it didn't involve a gun. It involved a knife, where a person was arrested for defending himself with a knife that they said was illegal, and the courts ruled no, there's a right to keep and bear arms, and in this case it was a knife was to keep and bear arms under the Oregon Constitution. It wasn't under the federal Constitution. And we realized we had a problem here, so we started doing legal scholars conferences, and there were 2 real noted ones, one at Boston University and then one at the University of Arizona. Where we brought legal scholars and attorneys together to map out what we needed to do to build the foundation to ever get a case to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that worked out with transpired to a number of law review articles and articles in history publications and other places on Second Amendment and gun rights, and that led us to bringing what probably was our very first court case, which actually was in Connecticut against the city of New Haven, which banned the sale of handguns in New Haven, Connecticut. And we sued on that, and that we actually sued under a preemption law in the state that didn't allow the cities to pass those kinds of laws. And we wanted to make national headlines that gun control, gun ban scheme ruled unconstitutional. And it wasn't done under the Second Amendment, but on the other hand, the headlines were great, and it showed judges around the country you could rule in favor of gun rights. And then our second biggest area was when San Francisco passed a ban on the sale of handguns. We sued on that one, and again in California, and that was under preemption as well, and it went to the state Supreme Court. We won it unanimously, again under preemption. California is one of the few states that doesn't have a right to keep and bear arms, state constitutional protection provision, and we won there. And so we started winning some of these court cases, not necessarily on Second Amendment grounds. And one of the things that really came out of our scholars conferences was the fact that, you're never going to get a case in federal court against any of these state and city gun bans or gun laws because the Second Amendment's never been incorporated through the 14th Amendment to make it applicable to states. It only applies to Congress. And, of course, that made life a lot harder for us, and that's why we picked out in Washington, D.C., which had a gun ban on handguns or any functional firearm in your own home. And we were able to then file that in federal court to get the ball rolling, which then led to McDonald, which did incorporate the 14th Amendment. So this was a long thought-out process with an awful lot of work behind the scenes to make it all happen.
I keep saying one last question, but this really is the last question because I promised you I wouldn't keep you all morning. But one of my favorite sayings, and I see it on T-shirts every once in a while, I don't ever use it on air, but one of my favorite sayings is the Second Amendment is my carry permit. The 14th Amendment is my reciprocity agreement. Do you foresee, Alan, us ever getting really back there? Do you see it getting to where you don't nationwide need a carry permit?
In today's environment, with Joe Biden in the White House, Nancy Pelosi the head of the Senate, and Chuck Schumer, House and Chuck Schumer running the Senate, there's no way that's going to happen. You'd obviously have to have 60 votes in the Senate to ever get it passed to begin with, to bust the filibuster. So the odds in the future are rather slim as well. We do have reciprocity between a number of states right now, which has grown over the years tremendously. We now have a number of states where you can carry without even having a permit, constitutional carry. We're at 25, I believe, in Florida. It looks like it's going to become 26. So we're moving in the right direction, but this is going to be a long, slow, drawn-out process. A lot of work.
Alan, thanks so much for taking so much of your time to talk with us today, man.
My pleasure to all of you. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it and having me on as a guest. And thanks for all your hard work, all of you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and we will go ahead and let him go. And for us, we're going to have one more topic, and we've only got 19 minutes left. So I put a lot of time into Alan. Of course, he's Alan Gottlieb. I'm not going to cut him short.
Okay, I'm signing off. Bye, guys.
All right. See you, Alan.
See you later.
And as we go into our last topic, I was just looking over at SCOTUS blog. There are 4 dates left of June that they're going to be releasing their decisions. The 6th they are scheduled to release. The 13th, the 21st, and the 27th are the 4 days they have listed left to release decisions. That's a Monday, a Tuesday, and a Monday. And after that, they're done for the year, at least according to SCOTUSblog.com. After that, they're in recess. So I really do expect the decision for NYSRA versus Bruin to come down, honestly, in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much. And like you said, and like he said, it's not a question of whether or not we win. It's a question of how big we win. I'm hoping that Justice Thomas is the one who writes the decision, because he's been the biggest advocate for the Supreme Court even taking up a Second Amendment case. It's literally, the Second Amendment's been treated like a redheaded stepchild by the Supreme Court. And what's made it worse is that you've had lower courts all across the country have basically thumbed their nose at Heller and McDonald. And the only thing that they've given any deference to in that decision was, well, Heller says that you can have reasonable regulation. And they've really abused that term, because first of all, there's nothing reasonable about most of the regulations that they've put in place. And when a reasonable regulation turns into an infringement, and that's exactly what it's turned into. In most cases, it's turned into an infringement.
Yeah, it absolutely has. We had a discussion yesterday. I talked with Alex Uli on the air, and Alex's opinion is that the majority decision is likely to be written by either Justice Thomas or by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And either one of those two, in my opinion, if it comes out to either one of those two writing the majority opinion, is going to be a very solid win for us. There was, and I'll have to pull it up again, there was an opinion piece that came out in February where they were hoping that, where was it? I'm pulling it up here. There was a piece that was up on Washington Post in early February, and I titled this in our show notes between Alex's and I as, "Oh dear God, please no," that Justice Breyer could write the majority opinion as his parting shot on the way out, and that would mean him changing his vote from no to yes. And I'm like I said, oh dear God, please no. You know, that would
it would require in order to do that, because as we now know, they go through multiple drafts, and you're not going to have a Justice Thomas sign on to a majority opinion that is anything less than a full-throated defense of the right to bear arms outside the home. I just don't see him signing on to a majority opinion that would do that.
Yeah, but like I was started with, either Amy Coney Barrett or Thomas would be a very solid win on our side. So
I'm rooting for Thomas.
Yes. Last story I put up in show notes is, and I got to close this one up because I'm on the wrong set of show notes. The last story is, this one is off of Axios.com, and it appears they did some digging, and this may actually just be an out of context quote, but Axios was doing a story about red flag laws, and they think they found a crack in the pro Second Amendment armor. NRA is solidly anti red flag law. SAF, Gun Owners of America, are solidly anti red flag law. They were able to get Mark Olivia of NSSF to get a quote, already in place in many states can be red flag laws already in place in many states can be a palatable compromise as long as adequate due process considerations are addressed, Mark Olivia, NSSF's managing director for public affairs, told Axios. And they put the whole title of the argument as, is there a crack in the pro Second Amendment armor? And Craig, you and I had a little bit of a discussion of this pre when we went to air. The problem is, as Mark Olivia said, the due process considerations. So many of the red flag laws in the states, the majority of them don't have due process.
Right. If the hearing process is ex parte, meaning you don't get to be there, you don't even know that the hearing is taking place, that's not due process. You not being able to face your accuser and losing a fundamental right without having committed a crime and without even being able to face your accuser, that's not due process. Now you have people who will argue, well, yes, it is. Now there are, people in general, it's not the idea of a red flag law in and of itself that is bad. It is that, once again, that lack of due process. Ducey, the governor of Arizona, actually proposed a red flag law where you do get to go before a judge before you lose your rights. That it didn't pass. But at least that was the one difference, and that was one that actually I believe, don't quote me, that the NRA actually did support because it has those due process protections. In California, it's so bad. It's kind of funny because what they do is not only do you lose your rights, but they then also issue what's called a gun seizure warrant, where law enforcement can now go to your home, your place of business, wherever they think you have a gun, they get to go there and search for it. Now imagine this. This is what's so crazy that people don't get. So in other words, the judge gives them a thing saying this person is a danger to themselves or others. they are believed to be armed, go take their firearms. Now, you and I know that law enforcement is not going to show up with candy and flowers and, a nice note saying, hey, we're here to say hello and take your guns. No, they're going to show up fully armed, fully tactical, with all of their tactical gear.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, you didn't know they were coming. Now, one, that is just beyond the pale. But imagine if the person really is a danger to themselves or others, and this occurs. I don't see that being a situation. I see where that's a situation that could end very, very badly for both that individual and for law enforcement. There's already been at least one person who has lost their life as a result of this.
You're talking, wasn't that, it was either Rhode Island or Connecticut, I believe.
It was either Rhode Island, it was somewhere back east.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an elderly African-American gentleman who was just, once again, they just showed up. Law enforcement showed up, and he refused to give up his gun. There was a struggle, and they wound up shooting him. Once again, for doing by the way, once again, this is a guy who broke no laws. He did absolutely nothing except refuse to give up his right to bear arms.
Yeah, and
it is by definition a gun confiscation law.
Yes, it is. And my major there are two things I have against red flag laws. Number one, you're going after the wrong thing. If somebody truly is a danger to themselves or others, you're taking away the gun, which is a very effective weapon, but you're leaving them the keys to the pickup truck. You're leaving them the 5-gallon gas can. You're leaving them the axe. You're leaving them all kinds of weapons. You're just taking away the guns. Do you think taking away their guns may push them a little more over the edge if they really are a danger to themselves or others? That's problem number one. Problem number two is there's all kinds of lawyers on the other side pushing for these guns to be taken away. Do they get to appear in front of the judge? And if they do they get a lawyer to represent them? And does that lawyer have time to prepare?
Exactly. It's important people to understand, these are civil proceedings, not criminal, which means you are not entitled to a lawyer. And they don't tell you what standard you have to meet. When you go into court, you are guilty until proven innocent. And they don't tell you, okay, so do I need to go get my own psychiatrist? Do I need to go my own mental health evaluation? What do I need to do to prove that I am not a danger to anybody? They don't tell you that. You just have to go to court and hope you convince somebody.
Well, and just looking back at this whole statement, and this is kind of back to what Craig said almost at the very beginning, is this a case of when pigs fly? I mean, are we just looking at some sarcasm and some irony in this statement here? It's not even a direct quote. It's kind of like a paraphrased idea or summary of something that might have been said. And, Paul, you said was this taken out of context? Well, maybe it was. Maybe this was absolutely, that's a compromise whenever we have due process considerations and they're addressed and this actually, works properly, which it never will. So, again, when pigs fly, I don't feel like this is anything representative of the gun industry or of the 2A community as a whole. And I feel like, hey, if you're looking for something, you're going to find it. If this particular person or interviewer or journalist or group was looking for something, maybe this is what they found and they just kind of grasped at whatever and this is what they came up with. I don't like stuff like this. It feels wrong.
Yes.
Well, the other thing, Beth, that I'll throw out there, and this is important to understand, is there is a difference between the Second Amendment community and the firearms industry. And there are many places where the firearms industry has differed from the 2A advocacy. And I get that, but because they're representing a different aspect of the Second Amendment. They're representing the firearms manufacturers, and it's a business. And there's places where we're going to disagree. So, but it's important to understand that there is a difference. And they keep trying to lump us all in together like, oh, there's this evil firearms. It's like, no. Most of the money that's going into advocacy are coming from your neighbors are coming from, your doctor, your lawyer, your teacher. All of these people are all part of the 2A community. It's not coming from the industry itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation when I was at the NRA show last weekend. I was actually talking with Cam Edwards of Bearing Arms, and we had an interesting conversation in that both Cam and I consider ourselves to be in the Second Amendment rights community. We're not necessarily gun guys. We're not in the gun community. We're in the Second Amendment rights community. We consider ourselves Second Amendment rights guys. And I think a lot of my friends are in that same boat. Mm. We own firearms, and some of us own a lot, but that's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is the rights, not necessarily the equipment.
I always say I am a Second Amendment civil rights advocate.
Yeah.
Because it is, civil rights are not, it's not what the left wants you to believe, which is special rights for special people. Civil rights are the rights due each and every one of us. And the right to self-defense, which is codified in our Constitution as the right to keep and bear arms, that's a fundamental right that's due every single one of us. So, yeah, no, I consider myself, once again, I always say I'm a Second Amendment civil rights advocate.
And along with those terms too, I like to say that I'm a firearms safety advocate, because I want to steal that phrase back from the anti-gun, from the anti-right crowd that's trying to say that they're the ones that are providing education and training and common sense and safety. So I'm going to throw that one on my list too. I'm going to take it back.
Yeah, well, that's a great one, because they're not interested in firearm safety. They're interested in taking away firearms.
Control.
That's not firearm safety.
I want to get some comments in here, because we seem to have lit up the commenters, but gun websites, Pete over there says they win either way with the scenario Craig just described. They take the guns peacefully, and they can say our bad law worked. Or if the police cause a gunfight, they say, see, guns are bad. And then Bobby G, and these are all going to be coming from the YouTube side. Bobby G says this will cause many regular folks to not interact with others. It will be very infrequently people will have skewed ideas of mental health, so if someone gets angry over something, it may be seen wrong. And one of the things, this is really dangerous, and I want to go into this here real quick as we're running out of time. One of the things I see unintended consequence of red flag laws, it could cause gun owners to not seek mental health help, because they don't want to be labeled as nuts and get their gun rights taken away just because they see that they feel the symptoms of depression, and they went to go see a psychiatrist, psychologist, and all of a sudden the county sheriff shows up at the door coming to take their guns away.
We actually had members of that industry, and when they were instituting the red flag laws in California, who came out against it, because that was their exact concern, was that people would be discouraged from being able to would be discouraged from seeking the sort of help that they need.
It could be so easily weaponized against people. I think about my previous marriage and going through postpartum depression, and it was terrible. It was a horrible place in my life, and mentally and emotionally I needed to seek help, but at that point I did not. And an ex-husband could easily use that information and say, oh my goodness, this person is a danger to herself and to my child. And that would definitely be a reason why someone in the gun community who otherwise is so responsible would possibly steer away from something as responsible as seeking help when you need it for mental struggles or issues.
And by the way, just to keep in mind, in none of these laws that have been written, is there anything, no mental health professional is involved in any of these decisions when it comes to taking away your rights. So it's not like there is a mental health evaluation. This is literally, it is someone going to a judge and providing one-sided information.
Pointing a finger. Yep.
That's all it really is. And by the way, once they take your rights, they don't offer you anything. They don't offer you any mental health, any assistance if you are deemed to be a danger to yourself or others. There's nothing that they offer you or that's included to help you to not be, to help you to get out of that particular position. Which is why whenever they start talking about this being about mental health, I say they're a liar, because you don't address mental health at all in the law.
And it's very difficult once they are taken to get your guns back.
Exactly.
For example, when I talked to Alex Uli about this in Indiana, it is you have to fight to get them back, and there's no assumption you're going to get them back until 18 months after the initial order. And there's no protection. For example, they just go to the police department. There's no assumption that the guns are going to be taken care of. If you're a collector, there could be a very egregious damage done to your guns when they just throw them on a rack somewhere, and humidity and time take their toll.
The Firearms Policy Coalition actually looked into the cases filed in California over the first few years, and what they found was in cases where the individual was deemed to not be a danger, meaning they shouldn't have lost their rights, they were supposed to get their guns back. In 80% of those cases, the individuals did not get their firearms back.
Wow. So you weren't adjudicated mentally ill, you didn't commit a crime, and the judge found for you, but you still lost your guns. Oh, goodness.
And it was apparently that guy on the farm as an 18-year-old who pointed you out, too. So the guy on the farm, it's the same guy. He's back again, and he's red flagging you.
All right. 2 comments, and we're already long on time, but 2 comments, and then I'm going to kick us out of here. Pete over at Gun Websites. Well said, Beth. The anti-right side are attempting to take them. Gun safety, because you've been so effective at being a positive role model. And he follows that up with, and a few other people along with Beth are a positive role model. Yeah, so thanks, Pete. As we close out, I'm going to start with you, Craig. Is there anything you want to plug? Is there anything you want to promote on our way out, bud?
Just want to encourage everyone, watch The Rundown. It's Monday through Friday. We talk about 2A news and conservative views. We just basically talk about the rundown of the news stories of the day. It's once again, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on OpsLens. You can listen to us on Watch on Spotify or wherever you get your audio podcasts. It's at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday.
All right, Beth, is there anything you would like to promote? Anything you would like to push on our way out?
Well, sure. I don't get to talk very much, but I do write a lot. So you can find a lot of my work on usconcealedcarry.com. There's blogs, articles, all sorts of great things with Concealed Carry Magazine as well. And of course, if you're on social media, find me on Facebook, Pacifiers and Peacemakers with Beth Alcazar. I try to keep up with dates and events and training and other random things that might pop into my head. So
as a recently minted USCCA instructor, I now have access to get to a lot of that information, and I got to say, if you are a member of at USCCA, it's well worth your time to go look that information up. There's a lot of great information up there, and Beth does put a lot of it out. There's a lot of great stuff there. So I think that is going to do it for us today. We're over 3 minutes long, so thank you everybody for coming along on the journey. And again, even though he's not here personally I want to thank Alan Gottlieb, my boss, for coming along and taking a good chunk of his morning out to bring us up to date on what's going on with the SAF and where things are happening. And I want to thank you for tagging along and listening and watching. Everybody, come join me 5 p.m. Central Time all week long next week. Thanks for watching, everybody.